One of the greatest inefficiencies in most organizations is role clarity. It's having each employee understand what the priorities of their role are and where they should spend their time and how much time they should spend on those priorities. And today I'm going to share with you a very simple but very powerful process that will create role clarity across your entire organization. Welcome back to the Stop the Vanilla podcast. I'm excited today about our podcast because I'm going to share with you a very, very simple process that all of our clients use to create role clarity across their organization. Now, let's talk a little bit about role clarity. Role clarity is really understanding what the priorities of my role are and how much time I spend on each of those priorities. Recently, I started working with a leadership team that had 7 people on the leadership team, and we use our behavioral science tools. We assess each member of the leadership team and then put development plans together, do a team development exercise, and so forth. And 5 out of the 7 team members had low role clarity. And low role clarity just creates a lot of inefficiencies because they don't understand what their priorities are, where they should spend their time, and it just creates a ton of inefficiencies across your organization. And it's just one of those things I discovered in doing this for 20 years. You know, you think about, in general terms, people understand their roles and what they're supposed to focus on, but candidly, that's not the case in most organizations. And the key accountabilities process that I'm going to share with you today takes about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes to define the key accountabilities for any role in your organization that create incredible role clarity, that enable the person in that role to be the most productive that they can be because they understand what their priorities are ranked in order of importance, and then they understand the time of the week or month that they need to spend on each of those key accountabilities. And when I share this process with our clients, because it's so simple, I'll show them how to do it once or I'll walk them through the process, and next thing you know, they're doing key accountabilities for at least all the major roles in the organization, if not all the roles. So last week I trained a team, I walked them through the key accountabilities process, and now each of those leadership team members are doing the key accountabilities for all of their direct reports. So we're going to go from having lower role clarity to having high role clarity, and it creates incredible efficiencies across the organization. And so I'm going to walk through how to do the key accountabilities process with you really quickly at a high level, and then we also can provide you a video of me taking a team through a process to define the key accountabilities for one of the roles in their company. And I just want to encourage you to use this process not only for your role, but for the roles of all the direct reports that you have. Because when you provide role clarity, you are automatically going to increase the productivity of yourself and the people that report to you. So let's walk through this process real quickly at a high level, knowing that you can tap into the blog about key accountabilities process, you can tap into the video we have on it, and that there's just a ton of resources for you to find the key accountabilities for each position in your company. So the way the process works is that you determine the subject matter experts for the role. And subject matter experts are peers to the role or leaders to the role. Typically, we do not include any direct reports into the role that we're going to define the key accountabilities for. So think about that. You want peers to the role and you want leaders to the role. Fundamentally, the people that you want in the room to define the key accountabilities for any role are those that know the role the best. And that can include people currently in the role. So recently I defined the key accountabilities for a sales role for a company, and they picked 3 out of 20 of their salespeople to be in that room and help us define the key accountabilities for the role. So first is you identify the role you want to define the key accountabilities for. You identify what position this role reports into, and then you define the subject matter experts for the role. And that can be anywhere from 3 to 7. I've done up to 10 SMEs, subject matter experts for a key accountability process, but anywhere from 3 to 7 is typically optimum. So identify the role, identify what position this role reports into, and then identify the SMEs of the role. So the first step then is about a day before you do the key accountabilities process, you send a single page template out to the SMEs, and they define what are the reasons the job exists. It's not what are the actions of the job or what qualities we're looking for in the person. What are the reasons the job exists? And that's a very important clarifying point. When I did the key accountabilities process last week, they included a couple of the actions that this role takes. And you really want to focus on the reasons the job exists. So, and as you do a couple of these, it becomes much clearer on what that means. But the reasons the job exists. So each SME, a day or two ahead of the key accountabilities process, gets a single page that basically says, list the reasons this job exists. So, for example, if we're doing one on a sales role in your organization, that's list the reasons the job exists for that sales role. And one of them may be increased revenue. One of them might be take care of current clients. You're listing the reasons the job exists. And so each SME prepares their reasons the job exists and sends them to you ahead of time, and you collect all the reasons the job exists. So once that's completed, again, it takes them probably 10 or 15 minutes to prepare for the key accountabilities process. And then you can download the key accountabilities worksheet that we have at stopthevanilla.com, or you can email us at info@stopthevanilla.com and we'll send you the worksheet. But the first column is the reasons the job exists. So you list all the reasons the job exists, and you take all that input from your subject matter experts and put it into the worksheet prior to meeting with them. So now we're prepared for the key accountabilities process. So everybody gets into the room, all the subject matter experts, and you go to the worksheet, and all of the reasons the job exists are all listed in the first column. The second column is the category that you're going to put each into. So the first step is we list the reasons the job exists. The second step is to group the reasons the job exists. So we take a look at the first reasons the job exists, and this one is help sell equipment. So we put category A on that one, and we put a title on the key accountability statement, which is the third column. And what I would encourage you to do as you're listening to this podcast, or previous to the podcast or after, download the template, because there's 5 columns on the template, on the worksheet, and it's really simple. And so it would help you to understand as I walk through this process. But the far left column is the reasons the job exists. The second column from the left is the category. And then the third column is the key accountability statement for each category. So you go through the reasons the job exists with the team, the SMEs. And so the first one was help sell equipment. That's category A. Then you go to the next one, and it's install machinery when necessary. Is that part of the category A, selling equipment, or is that new key accountability? The team says that's a new key accountability, so you put B on it. And so you just go through the reasons the job exists, and you put them into the appropriate categories. This specific role that I'm looking at right now has 4 key accountability statements. So they took all the reasons the job exists and they put them into 4 categories. And so you group all the like reasons a job exists to create a category. So again, the first step is list all the reasons a job exists. Then the second step is to categorize them. And then once you categorize them, then you put a key accountability statement for each category. So as I said, the one that I'm looking at right here has 4 key accountabilities to it. And we write a key accountability statement for each of the categories. And that really summarizes the key accountabilities for this role. And then the next step is to rank the key accountabilities. And so I have each SME in the room rank them in order of importance, with 1 being most important. So in this case, there's 4 key accountabilities. They needed to rank them to 1 to 4. And then I get the ranking from each person, and we take the average, and that's our first draft of our ranking, and then we talk it through. So if one person puts one key accountability as number one priority and another person puts that same one as a 4, we got to talk that through. We got to understand why they see it differently. And it's really just a healthy discussion on what the priorities of the role are. And then the next thing, once you agree on the rank, the next thing is what's the weight or the amount of time that is spent on each key accountability of the week, in a week or a month, whichever's easiest for you to think through. And we like that column to add up to 100% of their time. Obviously, there's going to be things outside of their key accountabilities they may spend minor times on here and there, being in a meeting, whatever. But for the most part, we want to spend them a majority of their time on these key accountabilities. So each subject matter expert then takes each of those 4 key accountabilities and puts the amount of time in a week or a month that they want the person or that position to spend time on. So, for example, the number one ranked item for this specific role had 15% of their time spent on this key accountability. The number 2 ranked item had 40%. Now, it's very common that your number one ranked key accountability might not have the most time spent on it. And one of the reasons that is because a lot of times one of the most important parts of someone's role is to work on the planning or the strategy side of their role. Very important, but I don't spend as much time on it as I might the other key accountabilities of that role. So just to summarize, you list all the reasons the job exists, you then categorize those reasons into categories. And in the example I have here in front of me, there's 4 categories to this role. You define a key accountability statement for each category. You rank in order of importance, and then you put the amount of time in a week or month that you want this position to spend on each key accountability. So there's really 5 simple steps to really define exactly where you want each role to, what their priorities are, and how much time you want them to spend on each priority. And then the next step is we define what education requirements we want for the role. And we use a term of hard or soft. Hard is required. So in this case, they wanted a bachelor's degree, and that was a hard requirement. And then they wanted previous experience in this role, but that was a soft requirement for this company because they don't have a problem. They enjoy actually training new people into this role. So you define the education and experience that you want in the role. So in a matter of an hour, you have identified the priorities for the role and where you want them to spend their time. And that creates incredible role clarity regarding this role. Now, once you've defined the key accountabilities, you clean up the document, and you'll see how we clean that up if you watch the video as I walk the client through this. But we clean up the key accountability statement, and then we put them in a summary form. And we use the key accountabilities worksheet and the summary form for several different things. So number one is we use it for development. So if a person's having lower role clarity, we'll do the key accountabilities for their role, and now they have clarity on where they're supposed to spend their time and their priorities, right? The second thing that we use them for is performance reviews. So we can look at, are they spending the right amount of time on each key accountability? Are the key accountabilities prioritized right? Because those things can change over time. And so it's a really healthy discussion for a performance review. Are you spending 40% of your week on this key accountability? And the leader and the team member can talk about, yeah, I'm probably maybe not spending that much. And so one of their development action plans out of that performance review is to spend more time on that key accountability. And the other place that we use the key accountabilities is to job benchmark a position. So for this position, we defined the 4 key accountabilities for it. And then each subject matter expert then goes back to their desk and takes what we call a job survey. And a job survey is where you answer about 100 questions about the job based on the key accountabilities. And then we take all the subject matter experts' answers and we combine them to create what we call the job benchmark. And the job benchmark tells us exactly what DISC profile, what motivators, what soft skills, what problem-solving capabilities, leadership capabilities. It gives us about 100 pages of content on what we want in this role. And it creates an exact bullseye of what we want in this role. And so key accountabilities process can be a standalone process, or it can be the start of job benchmarking a role. And once you've benchmarked a role, in essence, created a bullseye of what you want in the role or what an optimum performer looks like in the role, now you can hire towards that benchmark, or you can develop towards that benchmark. So over the last year and a half, we've helped a company hire 20 salespeople against a single benchmark. And so every candidate's compared against the benchmark, and then every candidate has customized interview questions based on their gap to the benchmark. And so the key accountabilities process is the start of the job benchmarking process. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use the key accountabilities of a role. Another way that a client recently was using them is to create job descriptions across their company. So they define the key accountabilities for a role, and they wrap their job descriptions around those key accountabilities. Because in essence, what are the key accountabilities? They are the job description, right? I mean, it's exactly what you want the role to do. And so they add just a ton of value to the organization in many different ways. So the key accountabilities process is really one of the processes that we provide that most organizations that we work with grab onto it, implement it, and experience significant impact from the key accountabilities process. We use them in our organization, and it's something that actually we need to look at again and update again, the key accountabilities for my role and the rest of the roles in our organization, and just make sure we have clarity where everybody's spending their time and making sure that the key things of the organization are a focus of somebody's role. So my call to action to you today is think about a role in your organization that you struggle with the most, be it you can't hire for it, you're struggling with retention, or there's just a lack of clarity around what this role does. And download the key accountabilities worksheet, listen to this podcast, or watch the video of me taking a client through the key accountabilities process, and define the key accountabilities for one position in your organization. And it takes, again, about an hour and a half to do, and it will create so much clarity that you're going to want to do this for several other positions in your organization. So thank you for joining us today, and recognize the power of understanding the key accountabilities for each role in your organization, and that the number one thing that you need to provide as a leader in your organization is not only strategic clarity, which we talked about previously in a podcast, but one of your primary responsibilities is to provide role clarity, to have everybody in your organization understand exactly what their priorities are and where they're supposed to spend their time. And I look forward to talking with you soon here at Stop the Vanilla Podcast, and have a profitable day.
I'm your ice cream man, stop me when I'm passing by. Oh my, I'm your ice cream man, stop me when I'm passing by.